Welcome back with some international news now. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the decision by the International Criminal Court to issue a warrant of arrest against him for alleged war crimes is anti-Semitic. In their decision, the ICC judges said there are reasonable grounds to believe Netanyahu and his former defense minister, that's Yoav Gallant, were criminally responsible for acts including a humanity of murder, persecution, and starvation against the civilian population of Gaza. Meanwhile, the United States has rejected the arrest warrants, saying it is discussing its next steps with its partners, including Israel.
We fundamentally reject the court's decision to issue arrest warrants for senior Israel officials. We remain deeply concerned by the prosecutor's rush to seek arrest warrants and the troubling process errors that led to this decision. The United States has been clear that the ICC does not have jurisdiction over this matter. In coordination with partners, including Israel, we are discussing certainly those next steps.
Let's get more analysis now. I am joined by international criminal law expert, that's Dr. Nicola Palmer. Dr. Palmer, good to have you on the program this evening. So the ICC has issued arrest warrants for, I've mentioned Benjamin Netanyahu, former defense minister Yoav Gallant as well, but also Hamas's military commander, Mohammed Deif. What legal basis did the ICC use to issue these warrants, and why are they so significant, especially in the context of international law?
So the warrant's being issued by the International Criminal Court, and the legal basis of that is fundamentally this treaty called the Rome Statute. And so because the International Criminal Court has found itself to have jurisdiction, and that was part of the decisions that came out in addition to these arrest warrants yesterday, they've said that they have jurisdiction over the Palestinian territories, including Gaza. And it's on this basis that they can then issue these arrest warrants for two particular crimes. One is war crimes, as you mentioned, and the specific war crime of starvation. And the other is crimes against humanity. And this includes murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts that have to form part of a widespread or systematic attack against a civilian population. So the legal basis is fundamentally found in international treaty law.
I want to make sure that I understand what you're saying, Dr. Palmer. So Israel has rejected the ICC's jurisdiction, but also called the warrants politically motivated. How does international law then view such claims of jurisdiction that we speak about? And how does it affect the enforcement of these warrants?
So the International Criminal Court has actually looked already and issued a decision on whether or not it has jurisdiction over the Palestinian territories. And this was prior to the 7th of October 2023. And it is on that basis that the court has now reasoned that it continues to have that jurisdiction stretched into the period of time that these arrest warrants have been issued for, which is from the 8th of October, which in relation to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant, we're seeing that from the 8th of October 2023 until the 20th of May 2024, at least, as that's certainly the statement that the International Criminal Court has issued. The actual arrest warrants themselves have not been made public. What has been made public is a formal statement by the International Criminal Court that that the pretrial chamber has issued these arrest warrants.
But Dr. Palmer, the ICC does not have its own police force to indeed carry out these arrests. Can you explain how the implementation of these arrest warrants actually works? But also, what role does member states play in ensuring that these warrants are indeed carried out?
Yes, so the International Criminal Court, since its formation in 1998 with the signing of this Rome Treaty and the Rome Statute that formed part of it, meant that it really is dependent on state consent. But once countries such as South Africa have consented to and signed on to the Rome Statute, they then have obligations under international law to enforce it. So as it stands, there are 124 countries that are currently party to the ICC's founding treaty. And this means that those 124 countries have an obligation to arrest all three of the individuals who've just had international arrest warrants issued for them if they arrive on the territories of those states. So we really need to understand that the jurisdiction is underpinned by territorial jurisdiction, and the obligations that arise are obligations that arise from people arriving on the territory of that state.
But if a country like Israel, which is not a member of the ICC, if it refuses to comply with these arrest warrants, what legal or even diplomatic actions can be taken by other states, for instance, or even the international community to hold those involved accountable?
Look, it's very difficult. And, you know, we saw this we've seen this with Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir in 2015, where he came to South Africa, and indeed our Supreme Court of Appeal found that South Africa did have an obligation to surrender Bashir, but of course that was not what happened. And in fact, Bashir, of course, hasn't been surrendered to the court even after losing powers in 2019. So we do have to recognize that there is very little that the International Criminal Court can do to ensure that states do cooperate with it. A non-compliant state can be referred to what they call the Assembly of State Parties, which are the group of states that have signed on to the Rome Statute. And this can be done by the pretrial chamber. But at the heart of it, we are dependent on states themselves being willing to execute this arrest warrant. And so that's why what we're seeing in the wake of this announcement is a lot of attention, as your report showed, to what states are saying about whether or not they will uphold this arrest warrant and in fact arrest Netanyahu, Gallant, or Mohammed Das if they arrive on the territory of their state.
Let's explore another theme. South Africa played a role in really referring the situation to, or rather in Palestine, to the ICC. What does this mean for South Africa's position, especially on international justice, but it's a relationship with both Israel and the broader international community?
South Africa has been an incredibly important player here. It was one of the 7 states that referred the case to the ICC, along with Bangladesh, Bolivia, Comoros, Djibouti, Chile, and Mexico. And we've already seen the South African government come out strongly in favor of these arrest warrants. And I think this is a really important example of developing countries and global South countries playing a really active role in the international legal order and making very clear their commitments to international law and international criminal law in particular. So I think we really do need to recognize the central role that South Africa has played. And of course, as we know from discussions that have been happening over the last year, South Africa's willingness to open an interstate dispute with Israel before the International Court of Justice, in that instance on a charge of genocide, not war crimes or crimes against humanity. I think that, and we saw the ICJ issuing provisional measures based on a plausible case that Israel could plausibly be violating the Genocide Convention. I think this has also created pressure on the International Criminal Court to take its investigations further. So South Africa has played an absolutely central role in all of these legal proceedings in different ways.
Dr. Palmer, as we wrap, the warrants include accusations of war crimes such as deprivation of water, food, and even medical supplies to simple civilians in Gaza. How does international law then define these acts as war crimes? And what are the legal ramifications, especially for the individuals involved, or that's if they are convicted for these crimes?
Yes, so starvation as a method of war has been recognized as an international crime, including under the Rome Statute. And so what we're seeing there is a recognition that this type of behavior has been consistently understood by international courts and through treaties as a violation of international humanitarian law, as an unacceptable method of warfare. Now, what will happen if we did see the arrest of Netanyahu, Gallant, or Mohammed Deif is that they would then be taken into the custody of the International Criminal Court, and there would be a series of proceedings that would follow. The first of which would relate to whether the case had whether the case was admissible before the International Criminal Court, and then there would be a full discussion of the extent to which the court has jurisdiction, and then following that there would be a formal criminal prosecution that can result in up to life imprisonment.
Yeah. And very quickly, if you may, in your opinion, what is the likely impact of these arrest warrants on the broader Israel-Palestine conflict?
I think really we have to focus on, and at the forefront of all our discussions, needs to be the securing of a permanent ceasefire. Now, it is very unlikely that the issuing of these arrest warrants would on their own lead to that. The hope can be that they increase pressure on Israel to enter into those ceasefire negotiations, but as it stands, that is not happening. The other potential short-term impact that this decision has is that there are a number of domestic litigation processes that are happening in the UK and in the Netherlands to stop arms trade with Israel. And so that's another way where we just had the issuing of these arrest warrants gives further legal argument for the continuation of those efforts to prevent further arms sales to Israel at this time in light of the accusations of international crimes occurring in Gaza.
Dr. Nicola Palmer, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights into the ICC's recent decision, and this is to issue arrest warrants for Israeli as well as Hamas leaders as well.